second gospel acclamation. Alleluia, your word, O Lord, is true. Sanctify us in truth. Alleluia. And our holy gospel today is according to Mark, the 2nd and 3rd chapters.
Glory to you, Lord.
So, one Sabbath, Jesus was walking through a grain field along with his disciples. And as they were walking along, the disciples began to pluck the heads of grain from the wheat. And the Pharisees said to Jesus, "Look, why are they doing what's unlawful on the Sabbath?" And Jesus said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he and his companions were hungry? And so he entered the temple when Abiathar was the high priest, and he ate the bread of presence, which is not lawful for anyone to eat except for the priest. And then he also gave some to his companions to eat. Therefore remember, humankind is not made for the Sabbath. The Sabbath is made for humankind. Therefore the Lord, or the Son of God, is Lord even of the Sabbath." Well, then later, Jesus entered a synagogue. And there was a man there whose hand was withered. And the Pharisees were watching him to see if Jesus would cure him on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the man with the withered hand, "Come forward." And then he said to the Pharisees, "What do you say? Is it lawful to heal, to take a life on the Sabbath? Is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to take a life or to kill it?" Now the Pharisees, they didn't say anything. They were silent. And so Jesus stood there in anger and grieved at the hardness of their hearts. And then he said to the man with the withered hand, "Stretch out your hand." And as the man did so, his hand was restored. And immediately the Pharisees went and conspired with the Herodians in order to convict Jesus and destroy him. This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
Now I'm paranoid. Do you know the words, "Here I am, Lord, it is I, Lord"? Mm-hmm. We're going to sing that song in a few minutes at the end of worship, so I know it's a fan favorite for a lot of people. And those are words that we contribute to the song, but based off of the words that Samuel had in our first reading today, this call story that we heard a few minutes ago. But those are not actually the words that Samuel said in response to God's call. At least not what he said to God. When eventually he realized it was God, he said, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening." But at first, when Samuel heard the calling from God, he thought it was his mentor, his teacher, his caregiver, Eli. And so that Eli was calling for Samuel, that he needed Samuel for some reason. So Samuel gets up in the middle of the night and he goes to Eli's room. And he says, "Here I am." Or maybe as we would say in modern English, "I'm here, what do you need?" And he did this not once, not twice, but 3 times, thinking that Eli needed him. I wonder how many times Samuel actually would have continued to have gone, if at some point he would have thought it was the boy who cried wolf situation. And it's not Samuel who eventually realizes it's God that's calling. It's actually Eli who realizes this. And Eli finally realizes that it's God. Recognizes that it's God who's calling Samuel. Now, most of us have not heard God's voice come to us, calling our names in the middle of the night. But my guess is that most of you have heard God calling you in some way. Because each of us have a calling from God. The fancy church word for this, or church nerd word for this, is vocation. And I love the idea of vocation, that each of us has a calling from God, something that God has made us to do, created us to do. And most of us actually have multiple callings, not just one. So often we equate a vocation, a calling, with an occupation, but it's really not. Because some of us are lucky enough to get paid for our vocations, and some of us have an occupation so that we can afford to live for our vocation. And I can tell you from personal experience that being a pastor is a vocation. Now, vocations bring you joy. They make you feel complete, but they also bring their share of frustrations with them. And the frustrations, though, often become neglected or forgotten about when you think about the joy that they bring. And as a pastor, I can tell you it is a vocation to be a pastor. I would not know what I would do with myself if I wasn't a pastor, what my occupation would be. And we will probably, if I asked you what are some other vocations, I'm sure most of you would say teachers and doctors. And then there are, of course, things like lawyers and politicians, especially local politicians, who say that they felt called and compelled in order to change their community, to do something, to stand up and work in their local government to make it a better place. What are some other vocations that you can think of?
Sunday school teacher.
Just a teacher in general.
Yeah, teachers. Yeah, because a lot of teachers feel that they were born to be a teacher. Social workers. Social workers. What? Doctors. So, EMTs, child care workers, vets, pilots, firefighters, soldiers, athletes, professors, musicians, artists. And I think we'd all say, because of our own actual connection, funeral directors are a vocation, as they're a job that most of us would not want to do. But there's other vocations as well. We often feel like vocations have to be these long-studied occupations. But have you ever had a server at a restaurant that was so joyful to do their job that they made not just your dining experience better, but your entire day a little bit brighter? Mm-hmm. That person has found their vocation. Have you ever walked into a coffee shop early in the morning and you're not awake yet because you haven't had your daily dose of caffeine, and there's a barista behind the counter who's nice and chipper without being too much because it is early in the morning, and they get your order right, and maybe after you've gone a few times they start making your order before you even walk in the door because they see you coming? That barista has found their vocation. What about a cashier who plays a game scanning their items and always has some nice small talk to say and can talk about how great their day is going? That's a vocation. Or the chef, who's at the end of the day is absolutely exhausted, having not been able to sit down their entire shift, and then finally, when they do sit down, are just thinking about what they can make for the specials the next day. That's a vocation. The salesperson who is genuinely happy to help you find the perfect car or furniture or appliance or shoes, regardless of how picky you may be or how many times you've had to return them. That person has found their vocation. The manager who cares about their staff and wants to make sure that all of their employees are cared for so that they can do their job better. That's a vocation. All of these people have found their vocation. You don't have to have some fancy degree in order to have a vocation. But vocations are also not just paid jobs. Parenting is truly a vocation. And I say that as a non-parent, because I have a deep respect for parents. It is difficult to raise a child. I mean, you have all those sleepless nights worrying about their future and if they're okay. And that's when your child is in their 20s. You've already had years and decades of sleepless nights and losing your hair or your hair color, raising them. We all know people who are biologically parents, but were not called to the vocation of parenthood. And some of them have stepped up and have done their best, and others of them have walked away and have had other people step in their place. And we know people who have been called to the vocation of parenthood who are not biologically parents. And they have done their best as they have become adopted and foster parents or step parents. Or just that great neighbor who always has their door open for kids to be when they have a place, to know that they feel loved. And then there are the vocations, the callings, the caring for our community, the world that God has made. Those of you who are here at the church every Thursday night or every other Monday morning to help with the food pantry in some way to make sure that our community is fed, that's a vocation as you care for others. Just like I said earlier, I'm sure it brings you a lot of frustration, but also a lot of joy in sharing and caring for others. Those of you who come early for Senior Center to help set up, or who stay late long after the crowd has left to help clean up, that's a vocation. Those of you who are at the church on Wednesdays making quilts and other handcrafts, not for your own personal enjoyment, but in order for them to be given away or to sold to benefit others, that's a vocation. Those of you who care for your neighbor solely out of a sense of being neighborly are hearing God call you. And the list of ways I see you answering that vocational call continues on and on. Sometimes our calling, our vocation, is heard so clearly that we cannot run from them. Other times we stumble into our vocation. It's not until months later when we realize how important that has become in our lives that we realize, oh yeah, this isn't just a hobby or a job for us, this is a vocation. Other times we need someone like Eli, a person to point out our gifts and our skills and say, maybe this is what God is calling you to do. Sometimes we just want to run away from that calling, thinking that it would be too difficult or too much work or cause us too much student loan debt or we wouldn't make enough money or we wouldn't be happy or it wouldn't bring us peace. But God has this tricky way of keep on calling us over and over and over again, just like Samuel, until we finally not just respond, here I am, but we say Samuel's actual words, speak, Lord, your servant is listening.